So, as I mentioned, my name is Sarah. We are going to, tonight's training is to prepare folks to volunteer with the IFER Fund, which is an abbreviation for the Immigrant Family Emergency Response Fund. So we'll go through, I'll introduce the organization and the purpose of this fund, give you a little bit of background and context about it. Then we'll go into the logistics, like what is the actual volunteer role? How does it work? And if we have questions, you can interrupt or use the chat as we go. I'll try to make space in between big chunks of it for answering questions. Obviously, we'll have time at the end for questions. So please don't hesitate to ask your questions throughout the presentation. Then we'll conclude with like clear next steps. So what you should do after tonight in order to be involved in the IFER Fund. And I'll talk a little bit about our timing throughout the evening. So that will make more sense as we go for when you might need to be available and what the disbursement cycles look like. So this training, as I mentioned, is to go through this whole process about how we realize the IFER Fund, the Immigrant Family Emergency Response Fund, which is a community-driven financial assistance effort. And so the volunteer roles are delivering cash to approved applications in ways that demonstrate trust, transparency, safety, and privacy. So those four things are going to come up several times. Trust and safety are really important right now. A lot of folks are skeptical, and that is, I would say, great because there is also a lot of harm that is happening in our communities. So that means the work is on us to, understand that and build that trust. And we'll talk a little bit about that through the evening, like where are those points that we are trying to do that in doing so. I think safety is also really important. I am always concerned about community safety, and I'm going to put all of us in that same bucket. So while some of us might not be targeted by the same forces, it is really important to me that we are all creating safe spaces for each other. And that also means making sure that you're being safe and being mindful of the safety of your partners in this project as well. Privacy is also really important. You will be given access to personal information about strangers, if you will. And part of why we use the systems that we do is to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect their privacy. So obviously that means things like you're not posting pictures, you're not taking pictures, you're not sharing names and identifying information, you're not taking a selfie outside of someone's home or outside of a space that could identify where their home is, right? I'm with good intentions. People are using all kinds of information to cause harm right now. So I would like us to be extra aware and careful of that and ensure that we're doing everything we can to respect and honor the confidentiality of everyone that we meet and engage. So a little bit of background, the Immigrant Family Emergency Response Fund, which is often called IFER, which is how you might pronounce it in Spanish, right? El Fondo IFER. You might hear me and others say IFER because we used to call it IFER in English and then IFER in Spanish. And then at some point we decided like, no, we should just call it IFER. But then I still mess it up. So let me tell you a quick history of how this came to be. So it was really a group of service providers in 2020 that were recognizing that immigrants, and specifically undocumented immigrants and mixed status families, so households with at least one person who is undocumented, but maybe not everyone, or maybe not both parents or adults in the family. Those folks were both disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and were excluded, were not eligible to receive government stimulus payments, right? So we all got that. And the folks in mixed status and immigrant households did not. And so the whole part of this was, seeing how everyone's trying to scramble and engage, and seeing that immigrants are disproportionately impacted by COVID. It felt awful that those same folks didn't have the same access to the resources and supports and tools that our government was providing to so many others. So this group of service providers reached out to a trusted philanthropic partner, which is the Marillac Mission Fund, to sort of describe this need for philanthropy to mobilize their rainy day funds, right? So we got a lot of funders that fund a lot of great work for immigrant services in the region. And we went to them and said, look, now's the time. We know you have other funds. We know there's reasons that you don't give it out and all of that, except in grant cycles and blah, blah, blah. But now is a time for you to show up in a new way and tap into the reserve funds, the emergency funds, and show up for community. And they did. So the fundraising since 2020 has always been sort of like funder to funder. So the funders organize themselves to pull money together and to put it into a pot of funds that can be then distributed to community members. So in 2020, the fund distributed $372,000 to 731 immigrant families. Each household, each family gets $500 in cash. We know that the cash is used to help with basic needs like housing, food, security, childcare, and alleviating debt. And even with that incredible work we did, about half of the applications that we received at that time still were left unfunded, right? So the need is tremendous. So when we came together again this year, we were having conversations since November of, what is going to happen in our community, who is going to be impacted, what are the impacts going to look like. And as things continued to develop between elections and inauguration, and certainly within the first month, we knew the financial impacts for immigrant families were going to be devastating. So we came together, I'm one of the original co-creators of the IFER Fund. We pulled in almost all of the original sort of creators and steering committee of the fund and said, is this a time that we reimagine it and redo this? And what could that look like? So the fund has been reimagined to support immigrants who are negatively impacted by increased immigration enforcement, right? And so we've gone to funders to say, we know you care, you're funding the ongoing work, we need you to keep doing that. And detention and deportation and enforcement and anti-immigrant climate is already impacting the health and well-being of Missouri families, period, right? Families in the region. So show up. And they have, and they are. So that's a little bit of the background. Who is involved today is the Immigrant Service Provider Network, which is an awesome coalition that's been around for a handful of years. I want to say maybe 10 years or so, pulls together a lot of organizations and agencies that are serving immigrants in a lot of different ways. They were really involved from the beginning. They have a lot of good contact with agencies that serve immigrants. And so they're a really key player in pushing information out into the community, usually through the service providers, right? Ashrei Foundation, where I work, is playing the role of lead organization, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a few minutes. And the Youth Bridge Community Foundation is where the actual pot of funds are held. So as funders and people are donating, they're making donations to the Youth Bridge Community Foundation. There's an advisory committee at Youth Bridge that is a handful of individuals and representatives that we're in relationship with, some that are deeply involved in immigrant services, and therefore don't have the time to be in the steering committee, but want to show up and support. Some that actually two, I think, that have moved out of state, but that were here from the beginning. Just a good group of people that understand the need and are there to make sure that that the fund is used for this purpose. Finally, there's a steering committee. There are multiple community organizations represented there. The steering committee, where I serve, makes all of the decisions in the nitty-gritty related to what's on the application, how do we safely store data, how do we do outreach, what do we say or not say, what's the message, like all of that, all of the decisions are made collectively in the steering committee. So basically what that looks like, if you're a visual person here, is that the steering committee reviews the applications in this gray box at the bottom, and the steering committee then is in pretty constant conversation with Ashrei as the lead partner. So Ashrei holds and processes all the applications. So we manage the online platform for applications. We manage the online platform for text messaging, which are text notifications about the applications and the process. We manage the volunteers and the volunteer coordination. We manage the money. So we send requests to YouthBridge, and then YouthBridge sends money to us, which we withdraw in cash to then prepare in the packets and send out into the community through you all. But the steering committee is the governing body, if you will, and then Ashrei comes in to make it happen. YouthBridge is involved. We talked about that, and the blue box to the side, those are the funding partners. So obviously Marilat continues to be a key player here, and there are other funders who are contributing. And then we talked about the IFER Fund, the advisory board at YouthBridge that also makes decisions. So, the Ashrei Foundation, I didn't put a slide in here about this. The Ashrei Foundation is a relatively new organization. We began operations in 2022. Prior to that, I served as the executive director of IFCLA, the Interfaith Committee on Latin America, which played the role of lead organization for IFER Fund in 2020. So I've been around, and I'm, Emily, one of the other co-creators, reached out to me at the beginning and said, would you do it again? And I said, of course we would do it again, right? So I'm glad to be here again. Ashrei works to heal and repair Missouri through justice and equity. We manage core and responsive programming. We have photo ID clinics in North City. We're part of a statewide coalition doing advocacy work. We're deeply involved with the Rapid Response Coalition, and a handful of other things that I'll be happy to tell you all about later. We just had a wonderful annual event last night, our summer soiree. Thank you to those of you who were there. It was so great, and I'm honored to say that because of a match, we have already hit our fundraising goal. I'd like us to hit the goal without the match, so the match doubles it. But we're getting there, and it's certainly a lot to celebrate. And I'm so thankful for the energy of the community and the volunteers and the donors that make this all possible. So let's get into the nitty gritty. I'm gonna trigger warning you that I'm starting with a flow chart. And if you're like, girl, don't put a flow chart in front of my face, I can't see it. Avert your eyes and just listen. So I'm going to go graphic first, and then there's bullet points on the next slide. Okay. So how all of this works, we're going to start in this top left corner. Volunteers are attending a training. That's you. This is awesome. We've trained volunteers a few times this year so far, so we're adding on as we go. After tonight, you'll be given a link to fill out an online registration form. The online registration form has a confidentiality agreement. It has some additional training videos and materials in there because it is it's a centralized immigrant justice volunteer training, volunteer registration form that is used by the entire Rapid Response Coalition. So just a note of caution that if you start seeing videos about there's some training information about recording ICE and interacting with ICE agents and what to do, That probably will not impact or intersect with your role as an IFER volunteer, but it's there because it impacts other volunteer roles that use the same form. So trust the information I'm giving you tonight. And if you see something and you're like, Sarah didn't say, it's because it doesn't apply to you. Okay. So then you'll fill out that form. New volunteers will get approved. So we go on the back end and everyone is vetted. Usually that means somebody knows someone and says like, yeah, this person is not intending to cause harm. Good to go. And we log your training date in there. At this sort of same time, applications are received and approved. So what has been happening, we opened for applications. Our first application cycle was in March of this year. The steering committee had decided at that point that we were only going to store identifying data for 3 months. And after 3 months, we were going to wipe the data. The primary reason for that is to protect against legal action and to make sure that we're not holding data that could put someone at risk. I think it would be pretty aggressive for someone to try to hit us with a subpoena for something within a 3-month period for us to respond to, which means if I'm deleting data, I don't have anything to produce or anything useful for purposes I would agree with or purposes I would disagree with, excuse me, to produce if I do receive a subpoena. So everyone who applied in March got copious text messages saying you are going to need to apply again if you want to be considered, blah, blah, blah. So all of that happened. We opened for a second 2-week application cycle in July, the end of July, and then that period closed on August 1st. I, in the past 2 weeks or so, have been cleaning all of the data and communicating with everyone that applied. So I can share that we have, in the second period, we received almost 1,500 applications, 1,500. We received applications in 12 different languages. 63% of the people that applied, I may or may not have just been writing this for a report for my board. 63% of the people that applied are first-time applicants. So they were people that didn't apply in March, which is wild. And almost 20%, so 1 in 5, reported having a family member detained in the last 6 months. So the need in our community is tremendous. And I will caveat by saying, I know, and I'll be first to tell you, $500 isn't a fix, right? And sometimes there's lots of good research studies that say many times $500 is the make or break amount between staying in your home or not, or eating or not, right? Like there's those tipping points in poverty, and $500 oftentimes changes it. So, so it's a lot. And we know we're not going to be able to do it all, right? So we received about 1,000 applications in our first application cycle in March. And to date, we funded about 300 of them, right? So the majority of people that applied in March didn't get funded, right? The way it sort of works, so I'm going to jump back into our spreadsheet here, or into our graphic here. So that's the green triangle. When we get to the point where I know how much money is in YouthBridge, then we randomly select that number of applications, and I send that request to YouthBridge, right? That's where I'm at right now. I'm waiting. So I know that there is a $200,000 pledge that is making its way to YouthBridge, which is why we've been delaying and why we're squeezing in this extra training, because we want to be able to get that money out right away. So it's supposed to hit this week, which I know we're running out of time for. So hopefully that will hit tomorrow. But once it does, then I will pull the number of applications. So I think it's like $255,000 what we think we'll be distributing this cycle. And so that's maybe 600 or 700 families. So I will pull that amount of families from the list, randomly selected from the list. I send a request to YouthBridge for X amount of dollars. And then the YouthBridge Advisory Board reviews the request and approves it. and money gets wired to Ashrei. So in the meantime, while that's happening, I'm sorting all the applications by zip code and region. So I'm grouping mostly by like St. Louis City, and then I have like a South St. Louis area. I have a near West and a far West county. I have a North county, and then I have like St. Charles plus, right? So anything that's like up there. That's how the applications have like generally geographically fallen in the past. I haven't grouped or done enough to know like what is this first cycle going to look like, but I would imagine it'll be pretty similar. We usually have a big concentration of applications in the city and in North County, and then pretty consistent, there are applications elsewhere, right? So I put them all in groups. Then you, in the meantime, will be, we will send the assignments for each team to the teams and say, here's your list of people, here's their name, here's their language, here's their phone number, and their zip code, right? And so what happens then, now we're on the left side of our flow chart here, is teams, you'll be in teams of 2. One person will come pick up the cash and the packets from Ashrei. The other person, usually divided by language abilities, right, on the teams, the other person starts reaching out to the people on the list and saying, you know, making coordination for when and where you can meet to deliver the packet. The volunteers coordinate with each other, make sure they know who's going where when. They meet, they make the delivery, that's the big star. At the delivery, applicants sign a cash receipt. So you'll have those. I'll show you in a little bit. They sign something that says like, yep, we got the cash. You take a picture of that, send it back to us. When we confirm that we received it, you shred or destroy securely that information, and that's the end, right? Right? So let me go into a little more detail with less graphics. Okay. So after you do the online registration, if you're not already in the Signal app, I need you to do that. So that's a secure messaging application on your cell phone or tablet. Everything we communicate is through Signal. So I won't email information, names and phone numbers and all that. It'll go through Signal. The Signal groups, we create a Signal group for each IFER team. So you'll have me and my colleague, Alana Hertel. She's Ashrei's Director of Operations and Engagement. You'll have both of us in a Signal group with your team. And we'll set that for disappearing messages. Usually we do it for like 3 or 4 weeks so that it's not disappearing so fast that you can't keep up with it or look where or who said what or what you're doing, but that it will eventually disappear. So the pictures that you put in there and things like that will go away. So after you register is when we start creating the teams. So I've already started pulling teams from our last cycles together. So I have a few teams already. I desperately need more. Ideally, we try to keep the number of applications per team, you know, low, like 10. But if we're dispersing $255,000 to, you know, 600 or 700 people, and we only have 10 teams, that's going to take us a long time. So I'm hoping that we will have closer to 30 or 40 teams, and we're not there yet, but this is in fact my job. So this is what I'll be doing over the next several weeks. But you'll get paired with someone. So if you're like, I go with my husband, you're going to tell me that, and you and your husband are going to be on a team if you're bilingual, one of you is bilingual, and or if I can have a team that doesn't require multiple language speakers. So there are applicants that want to communicate in English, in which case I can create teams that are only English speakers. I've also done, and partners can decide how you want to do this, where partners will, you know, husband and wife or happily togethered partners can pretend that they're one, you know, to become one and all, and play and then be like a team of 3, right? So if husband and wife want to go together and neither of them speak Spanish and I need them on a Spanish team, I'll add a third one and then it's a team of 3, right? So that's okay too. If we have copious amounts of volunteers, I'd love to have 3 at a time. That would be great. I would say probably for this cycle, I'm going to be pretty picky and get teams of 2 so that I can have more teams to cover more territory. So we'll create the teams. You'll get an invitation to join like IFER Team 18 in the Signal app, and we'll introduce ourselves and we'll need you to respond to make sure that like, yep, I'm in, this is good. That's also an appropriate time if you're like, oh my God, something happened and I have COVID and I'm out for the next 2 weeks. That would be appropriate to tell us quickly so that we can adjust and switch up the teams. Okay, so we make the teams. I am in pretty regular, not regular, I am in consistent and time clear communications with the applicants. So everyone who has applied has gotten at least 2 text messages from me in the last 2 weeks that say, we received your application. Then they got another one that said, we're waiting for funding. You'll, receive further instructions within 10 days, which will be next week. So they will all get messages. They will, I'll come back to you, Bruce. They will so when I send the request to YouthBridge, that's when I start all the organizing. So at that point, applicants will be notified that their funding was approved or that their application was approved for funding. They get text messages that says that. Their text message will say a volunteer will contact you within 5 or 7 days, right? At the same time that I'm texting them, the teams are getting the assignments and you can start contacting to start coordinating and scheduling. Usually that takes some time. Usually it takes 1 or 2 phone calls, a few text messages to reach someone and figure out when and where you're going to meet. So it's okay for you to start doing all of that before you have the cash, as long as you're not scheduling it for like tomorrow and you're not picking cash up till Friday. Like, don't do that, right? You can coordinate everything. Please coordinate everything with your team in the Signal group. Obviously, if you want to call each other, please call and do that. But please don't put it all in an email to each other and say, like, are you calling Steve? And I'm calling Thelma, and what's her number and what's her zip code? Like, keep it in Signal. Obviously, talk to each other however you need to talk to each other, but keep anything written in Signal. It does not bother me or Alana for you to go have a whole conversation back and forth in your Signal team group while we're there. We'll monitor for like, are you asking us for support? Do you not know what to do? But if you're not talking to us, we're not going to respond, and that's okay. Then you'll pick up packets, meet the applicants together, and then send that picture of the cash receipt back. So Bruce, to your question, Bruce asks, how long does it take between the applicant submitting the request and receipt of funds? It's a great question. So what each application cycle is 2 weeks long, and we do that intentionally to try to get to folks who are least connected to services, right? So that is the same reason that applications are selected at random. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when you applied, you're selected at random. Ideally, we keep it 2 weeks from when the application period closed to when the individual receives funding. The steering committee, decided this time that we're okay pushing that because we know we're going to get that 200K, right? We could have probably rushed and done a 50K disbursement and then pulled 200, the 200 more. But from a coordination standpoint, it made more sense to push it back. That was all explained to applicants. So the applicants are informed that it's going to take another week before they even get contacted. From the moment that they're notified, your application has been approved and a volunteer will contact you. Ideally, it's 5 to 7 days until they have cash in hand. So what that means is not, oh my God, you have to panic and do it tomorrow. What that means is start making the conversation, the communication with them. If you sit on that for a week, then it gets real problem, like it just lingers, right? So if you start talking to them when you get the assignments, it usually then is easily done within a week. And I will say the other wildcard factor there is the number of applications per team. So it might be that a team has 20 or 30 applicants to deliver and contact. That's clearly going to take a lot more time than like 5 or 7 people in 1 week. So some of that we're going to figure out in the next week or so of how many volunteers I can get in and how we can manage this. I will say as a side note, we've also thought about as a staff, if we can do a packet pickup, that if people like, can come to a library in the city, that we can like get a bunch of people to come do packet pickups on certain days there, rather than give to volunteers and volunteers to go, so that we could use volunteers for people that can't do that. But we haven't made that decision yet, mostly because I'm waiting to pull the approved applicants and see where the geography falls and things like that. I see a couple of questions in the chat here, so let me look. Great. Thanks, Bruce. I'll follow up with you. So one-time opportunity for folks to apply. The answer is no. We do have folks that have been funded, that got funding earlier this year, that applied again. So this time we have a weight system, like a point system, that if you have not been funded and are more proximate, more close to immigration enforcement, then you are in a prioritized bucket for funding, and we will fund through that and then move into folks that have already received funding, or folks who are preparing for immigration enforcement impact but have not yet been touched by that. The language in the application is something like, I have been, or I am experiencing financial hardship because of this, or I anticipate experiencing financial hardship. So that's kind of the distinction that we're putting there. So they can apply, and once they've applied, then they're kind of broken into those categories. We won't fund people like in the same application period twice. So if you get funded now, it'll be 3 months before we open applications again, right? And start that whole cycle over, and then you can apply again. Good. Other question in the chat. How do you handle it if no one on the team can communicate in the recipient's language? There will be people that will receive IFER funds that do not speak any language that we can coordinate. There's one, in fact, that I have not been able to find. It's a Guatemalan dialect, and I have not been able to find an online translator for it. So fortunately, we've been using very short Spanish language communication, and he is working it. Outside of that, what we'll do, we have one of our partner organizations has a telephonic interpretation service. So we'll have teams that usually I group those people who I think will need that into a team, and put it with a team, someone that has done that or is familiar with how to use telephonic interpretation. Basically, how that works is you call a number, you tell them what language you need, and then they connect you with someone live right there. We pay for that service, but that's what we'll use. Good questions. Okay, so where are you going to do these disbursements? That's up to you. I would say I prefer, this was very different in COVID, right? In COVID, we did almost exclusively home deliveries. And I had this whole training of like, put this laundry basket down and then step back 6 feet and then call on the phone. Like, it was COVID madness, right? We're not doing it that way. This is great. But that doesn't mean you have to go to someone's home. And it doesn't mean that everyone is going to be eager to invite you to their personal home, right? So that's a conversation that you as volunteers have directly with the people you're talking to. I don't need to micromanage that. You're working to build trust and confidence with them, right? So you can suggest, I'm happy to come to you if that's easy, if you want. You could say, why don't we meet at a library? I see that there's one here based on their zip code. Is that close to you? People have met in a Walmart parking lot, any kind of place. Oh, you're going to work and it's by the QT at X intersection. Sure. Whatever place you feel comfortable and safe going to, and they feel comfortable and safe going to, is where you should meet. We had a lot of success using libraries in the past few cycles, and it was actually really helpful to like be able to introduce people sometimes to those spaces and like what's there. Because you're delivering in the packet, it has information and a cash envelope inside it. It's not readily evident to any passerby that you're walking around with $500 cash, right? So there's not a lot of risk in that sense of like, you know, is someone going to see or know that you're doing that? Like, unless you're like, you know, broadcasting, hey, I've got $500 cash here, like people aren't going to know that that's what you're doing. That was a concern during COVID because we did like packet pickup, and then that meant we had to communicate with people that we were going to be all in one spot at one time with a lot of money. But that's not how the volunteers work, right? We talked about this, teams of 2 or 3 with language skills as needed. We would prefer, for your safety and for the recipient safety, that no individual make a cash exchange alone. I think there's a lot of gender dynamics in a lot of different cultures. There's a lot of other kinds of dynamics. Like, let's just not go there. I think it is more comfortable and safer for all if we can go in pairs. Sometimes if you need an exception to that, or flat tires happen and here's how it is and you're meeting at the library, I'm going to trust your judgment to maintain the kind of protocols and behaviors here that we're doing. So I mentioned this already. When you do it specifically is between your team and the applicant. You coordinate that. That's what I'm saying. You can chatter back and forth like, Denise, can you be, what 3 days this week can you go? Friday's good, great. Do all of that in the Signal chat. We're totally fine with that. It will not, communicating in Signal does not bother us. And do that. If it's mornings, if it's evenings, I would say please do your best to prioritize the applicant's schedule and availability. I know you are also volunteering. We are also the ones walking with the most privilege in this space. Even if we are having our own challenges in this role, we are the ones that should accommodate, not the ones that should expect to be accommodated. Okay, so take that for what it's worth, and please make good choices around when and where to make deliveries. Ideally, that our goal is 7 days cash in hand from approval to cash in hand, right? So approval hasn't happened yet. You'll receive the notification the same day that the applicants receive the notification that they were approved, right? So that will be next week at some point. And hopefully that means by the end of August, we will conclude this whole distribution cycle. Okay. That might flex based on capacity and the number of applications, and that's okay. The goal is not to sit on it. Good with that? Cold hard cash, $500 in $100 bills in an envelope, to answer your question in the chat. So the basic, I know I'm doing a lot of words. This is not always helpful for everyone. The basic role is pick up the cash, deliver the cash, and return the cash receipt to Ashrei to close the loop. Cool. I think I already talked through all of this. We're talking about team assignments. That's what's happening now. So I will gather you, make your teams based on language and team preference. So when you register, you can put in who you need to be, like who's on your team, or if you're doing it with someone, you already know it, put that in there. I will reach out to you if you are requesting to be an English only team and I need to separate you. I will ask you before I do that. And then once we put you on a team, that happens in Signal, and then you can accept it or ask questions or whatever in Signal, and we'll adjust accordingly. I do try to base it on your zip codes or the regions that you said when you register, or if you haven't registered, you can say where you're willing and able to go, and I do my best to match that. IFER Fund serves a 16 county region, so there are a few counties in Illinois, and then, all the basics in St. Louis, St. Louis County, St. Charles, St. Louis City, Franklin County, Jefferson County, what's out there? Warren County, whatever. All those counties, put your hand on the arch. It's those counties. So there are sometimes a few deliveries in Illinois that take a while to get over there. We're fortunate to have partners at Fuentes de Esperanza, which is part of Hoyleton Youth and Family Services in Illinois. They usually do the bulk of our Illinois deliveries. Depending on capacity and how many we have, I'll, look for folks who are willing to put in a drive together and head into Illinois. I also know that sometimes us city folk have a hard time getting all the way out to St. Charles. So if you're really opposed to that, let me know when you register that that's a deal breaker for you, and I'll do my best to accommodate. We talked about the award assignment and notification. We send all of that to you in Signal. Usually for packet pickup, Alana and I will have specific dates and times that we will be at a public library. So last time we did it at the Clark family branch of the library in Frontenac, St. Louis County Public Library on Lindbergh, just south of Lindbergh and 40. That seemed to be a pretty central location. We haven't figured it out, in full honesty, if we're going to do only there or one there and one in the city. It's a little harder to coordinate doing more than one location for packet pickup, because then we have to know who's going where when. We try to coordinate less. So we'll say packet pickup here this day, this day, this day, and then figure it out. We are hoping to have packets ready a week from tomorrow. So that's August 22nd is when we're hoping to start the next disbursement cycle. But you will receive notification from us over the next several days to make sure that timing is still on track. Okay. I see the question in the chat, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So after, let me talk about the packets real quick. The packets have a cover letter that is in English, and if another language is spoken, the letter is translated to that language. It has know your rights information, has red cards, has local resources, has information about the hotline, and a few things like that. So that's all in there. And the packet, there's an envelope and an envelope in there that has the cash in it. The cash envelope will be sealed when you get it. We count it at the bank and seal it at the bank. So I would ask you not to open it. If the applicant wants to open it and count it in front of you, that's totally fine. Sometimes they don't, and that's also fine, right? When you're delivering the packets, we will give you a cash receipt, which you'll see when you pick up the packets from us. We'll go talk through the cash receipt. Basically, the cash receipt says, I've received the $500. The volunteers are writing the person's name and the applicant ID at the top of the page. We give that to you. And then they sign and date at the bottom. I want to be clear that this is not a barrier. If people can't sign, if people write their name, if they're like, I can't do that, I don't know, you can verbally write a note on there. You don't have to, don't make this be an issue. So I'm going to trust you, and please get them signed. It's the best way to maintain our transparency and honesty with each other and with our funders. But don't make it be an issue. If someone signs in the wrong way or blah, 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 I don't care, right? The point is so that we have record that they received the cash. When you have those, usually, as you're some folks would like stack deliveries in one day, right? And so at the end of the day, or after each time, snap a picture of it in the Signal chat. Alana or I will, you'll see it, there's like a green check mark that we'll do on each picture after we log it. So don't shred your paper one until you see the confirmation mark in Signal. And when that happens, you're done. Question in the chat, are the majority of deliveries at night or in the day or random? Best answer is totally random. People have lots of different schedules, and volunteers have lots of different schedules. So I would say there is no pattern there. One thing that we didn't talk about is communicating with applicants. They receive text messages from a dedicated 866 number that's the IFER Fund like information line. When you contact them, you can expose your personal phone number if you want, or you can *67 to block a phone number before you call. So if you dial *67 and then the phone number, your phone number will be blocked on the caller's end. A challenge with blocking your number is that sometimes they won't answer. So you'll want to leave a message and say, I'm going to call back in 2 days or in an hour and blah, blah, blah. So give them an explanation why it's a blocked number. I'm a volunteer. I will share in your Signal groups the award notification message that the applicant gets, just so you can see it. So you're operating with the same information. It usually says, you know, a volunteer will contact you to coordinate cash delivery. Volunteers may call from a blocked phone number. They will try 3 to 5 times. If you don't hear from them within 5 days, call me back and let me know. That's usually a stopgap measure for like, if someone is not knowing about the calls or blah, 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 they will contact me and then I'll be in touch with you of like, hey, what's been happening, blah, 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 that sort of thing. The other piece is some people are very comfortable using WhatsApp. And if you want to use WhatsApp or text messaging with your personal number, great. The last piece is there are some applications online that you can do text messaging from an anonymous, a random phone number. And I will send those links in Signal, in the Signal groups when we create them. It's something like textfree.com where you can like create an account and it gives you basically a free phone number and you text through your browser. So it's a number, but it won't be yours. Do you mean the slides? Can you get the slides in a hard copy or something else? I see that the answer is going to come in the chat. So yes, tonight. So I will send everyone who attended, you will get, I'd be happy to share these training slides if that's helpful. And then any other information we push into the Signal chats when you're in Teams. So you'll have all the reminders, you'll hear all of these things again. You'll have the instruction of like, now's the go time, please contact your people. Now's the time for packet pickup. Here's when it will be. Here's where we'll be. So we'll be in constant contact over the next several days. Next steps, if you have not already registered to volunteer, please do. I will pop it in the chat here. The volunteer registration form is bit.ly/STLRRVols, all capital. Review the confidentiality agreement, liability waiver. Again, there's other training materials in there. Don't be alarmed. They might not all apply to you. If you have delivery partner preferences indicated on the registration form, if you have regions like where you can go or not go indicated on the form, I think there's a form a spot on the form for like when you're available to volunteer. I'm not going to fill it out. That's totally fine. I don't use that information for the IFER Fund pairings because you're going to set your own schedules anyway. So I will use geography information, but not availability. Then I will invite you to signal groups and we will get going. So I'm going to pause there. That's the end. I'm going to stop screen sharing. If you have any questions, I'm going to leave this up for just a second before we come back to full Q&A. If you're like, I'm already in Signal, but no one's talked to me, blah, 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 I don't know how this works. Send me a message. My number is on the screen. You can message me in Signal at any point, and I will respond and confirm and get you all up to date and on board. I'm going to stop sharing and pause for questions. Great. If there are no further questions, thank you for your time tonight. I will follow up with an email with the the printed slides, digital copy of the slides. This recording will be available on Ashrei's YouTube page later. So you'll also receive that information. And if you haven't registered, please go register to volunteer unless you've decided this is not a good place for you to serve. If not, that's okay. Thank you for taking the information. I'd be happy to talk to you about other ways you can show up. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank
I
you
look
so
forward
much.
to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.